Remember, we got to pay attention to other things other than just the work, because if you only pay attention to the work, you're not paying attention to all of the games happening around you. All right, let's see. Let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about one-on-ones with your manager. So, do you have one-on-ones with you? Do you even know what a one-on-one is? Let's start with that.
Like what? Like just talking to
So, a one-on-one
about work?
is... yeah, I mean, basically, it's a meeting that you have. Typically, it's like a private conversation just between you and your manager, and it's a chance to discuss work progress, maybe like if you have any challenges or roadblocks in your kind of, let's say, projects that you're working on. It's also a chance typically for feedback, more casual feedback, but sometimes your boss will give you like light feedback. And then depending on your workplace, this probably doesn't fit in your situation, but you'll talk about like career goals, professional development, and any other like workplace concerns. Maybe if you have questions about like raises or bonuses or things like that.
Yeah, we're supposed to, but not as that advanced. We're just talking. You're supposed to do, I forget what it's called. We never do it. We're supposed to do it, but you're supposed to check in with the SLT member and like converse about your day and like what happened and all that stuff. But yeah, no, we don't do that.
Yeah, that's more common than not. That tracks. All right, well, red flag number 1, not doing it at all, I guess. No, I mean, I think it depends. Your job, I mean, being part-time and stuff like that, I don't think it's as
I don't think it's super necessary. I think they do it between SLT members. So SLT members are just like managers and like key holders and all those types of things.
Yeah, do you know what SLT stands for?
No. But I know that's what
Senior
they are.
Leadership Team. SLT stands for senior.
They killed it. Yeah, they killed that. Awesome. They're doing an awesome job. I love my Valentine's Day gifts. I love my gratis. I'm killing it. But I think they do it. I think they do it between each other though, because you're supposed to have the one-on-one, but no, we don't do that. So,
well, that's another kind of problem. But all right, we'll talk about that more later. Okay, so. The idea with these meetings is really, it's like dedicated time to check in with your boss. When you get more into like a corporate setting, a lot of times you'll have like random chats with your boss. Like maybe you have a project, maybe you have something going on and they'll be like, hey, can we jump on the phone real quick for 5 minutes and talk about this? That's random, right? This is like every week, every other week, something like that. Not every day. Every day is a little bit much, but like maybe every day. I don't know. I'd need to see the case points for that.
It's definitely different from part-time. So every day would be a little hard.
True. So I think, it depends. So these meetings, oftentimes, it's really just to like keep communication open, making sure that you have space to like speak with your boss, to, work through any issues going on. A lot of times it's also, you just track on what you're working on, some feedback, and then sometimes you can ask for advice, or maybe there's dedicated time to talk about it. So there's a few kinds of one-on-ones. You have your regular week or your regular check-in. So this is going to be weekly, maybe bi-weekly meetings. In some cases, like Victor, he does like once a month, I think, with his boss, because his boss has like 15 direct reports. So 15 direct reports meeting once a week. That's like half your week right there in just one-on-one meetings. So sometimes it's once a month. It also depends on the kind of work. Like if you work in a really fast-paced environment like advertising like I did, typically it's like weekly, maybe bi-weekly is more common. But once you get into a space of like maybe it's not as time-pressing, not as urgent, once a month can be more standard. Then you have like performance review one-on-ones. So this is a little different. This is a little bit more focused on like evaluating your work and making suggestions for improvements. We're going to talk later in the season about performance reviews, so I won't go too much into that, but it's typically what it is. Then you have career development one-on-ones. A lot of the times you want to work this into your regular one-on-ones and always be talking about it, but sometimes companies will have like quarterly goals, quarterly targets, and so you'll schedule a one-on-one that's like one-off or like more on a quarterly basis or longer-term basis, and all you really talk about is how do you grow your career, talking about future goals and maybe like additional skills that your boss thinks you should develop or be working on. And sometimes if they have like more critical feedback, like I don't know, little T, stop fighting with the customers. That is something that they could be talking to you about working on. Let's work on your customer service skills. So stuff like that. Then you have
I don't need that. I don't have that problem. I don't know what you're talking about.
Tell that to your customers, all right?
The customers who I need to tell that to probably don't want to talk to me. Wouldn't have to be my
Let's
guess.
hope that there's no coupon ladies tuning into this podcast. That'd be the worst, wouldn't it?
They might come and
They'd
find
have
me
you
and get
clocked,
me.
bro.
They would. They would.
And then you have like feedback sessions. These are typically like for you. I don't know. It's a little less formal than a performance review. It's just to give feedback, just to provide like sometimes the best way to give feedback is usually to give it as soon as possible to the situation. So let's say you had a meeting with a customer and your boss noticed a couple things that you could work on and improve for your next meeting with the customer. They might schedule a one-on-one like that same day or later that day just to provide a little bit of informal feedback of like, hey, this was good, this was good, this was good, this was not so good. Maybe you can work on this. Maybe you can work on these things. Here's a couple tips and tricks that I know. Then you have project-based one-on-ones. So if you work on a specific project, there's this interesting scenario where like you have dotted line managers, which we'll get into, probably talk about it more. But in general sense, a dotted line manager is like, okay, I work for this guy and I'm on this department. But because this situation or because of this project, there's another leader, another manager that's running it. And I kind of also report to them when it comes to this specific project. So then you have like project one-on-one. So this is just going to be like more tactical, really talking about specific projects, check-ins, things like this. Sometimes, I mean, if it's dependent on the type of company, sometimes it can be in an email and it doesn't need to be much more than that. But who knows? People like getting on calls and hearing themselves talk. So you see it all. Now, when you get into standard one-on-one formats, because that's really what we're going to talk about here, because that's going to be your most common. Like all of these things happen, but they're more additional to your standard one-on-ones that you have with your boss. So they typically last anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. I'd say like sometimes maybe an hour if you have like a higher position. Like I used to have at least an hour with my manager back in the day, but I also ran an entire department and was building a 9-figure business. So we had a lot to talk about, but we also rarely talked about my career. So I don't know. I think that typically 15 to 45 minutes, usually weekly, sometimes monthly, right? Like I mentioned. And the structure is to give you a sense of what to expect. So usually have like small talk, how you doing? How was your weekend? In corporate America, you will probably get asked like what, basically like Monday through Wednesday, Monday through Tuesday. It's like, how was your weekend? What did you do? Wednesday is like, it could go either way. And then Thursday, Friday is, so what are you doing over the weekend? What are your plans? What do you got going on? And that's basically every call you get on. So it's good to have good answers for that. Even if you did nothing, it's good to like make people smile and just be like, hey, I did absolutely nothing. I didn't get out of my bed and I brain rotted for 48 hours straight. And they're like, oh my God, I'm jealous. I have 3 kids and I couldn't breathe all weekend. So, it's fun conversations like that. So small talk in the beginning. Then it's typically you go into work updates. This is like, I think the big thing with a one-on-one is it's your time. So a lot of the times, if you have more pressing things that you can talk about or like that you need to get off your chest or you need to say, then you can kind of adjust the agenda in your own way. But in a general sense, quick work updates. Then your manager might give you some feedback or just support. Like if you have roadblocks, if you're having challenges with other team members, or maybe you're like struggling to figure out how to navigate something at the company, then they're going to talk about this. Then you typically end it with some small chat around like future plans, career development stuff. Like this is like the other goals section. So let's say that one of your career goals were to get better at using Excel. Your manager might check in on like, oh, how's your Excel classes going? Like, whatever that is. And then, of course, like closing, which is typically action items and any follow-ups. Your boss might ask questions like, what are you working on? What challenges are you facing? The big one, how can I help? That's like every single manager probably will say this many times, even if they're bad. Sometimes this should get said. And, you know, what are your career goals? And then, you know, what feedback do you have for me? So a lot of times, like, I think people assume managers know everything, but we don't. We definitely don't. If you don't tell us, there's no knowledge of what is going on. And so, you know, really important to consider like what you're using this time for. And I think, so, you know, to go into our favorite section, the boss POV, and kind of like, at least for me, right? One-on-ones are great in the sense of, you know, it's time to catch up with the team. It's time to build your, let's say, like relationship with your boss. Like it's the one time you get where it's fully dedicated to you. So it's really important that you use it wisely and you don't, I don't know, like if you just sit there and spit off work updates, that's great. But remember, we got to pay attention to other things other than just the work, because if you only pay attention to the work, you're not paying attention to all of the games happening around you. And so, at least with me, you know, I used to have a wide range of one-on-one formats. My favorite one-on-one format was when I would take walks. And like yeah, well, you know, it really sucks sitting behind a computer all day. And so anytime I could get the chance to like go for a walk, I would definitely do that. Especially because I think I just, like, my brain works better when I'm walking and when I'm moving.
You need to get one of those walking desks.
Excuse me? A walking desk. Hold on, let me.
Yeah.
I'm going to look this up. A walking desk.
Yeah, it like raises up.
Oh,
and you can
yeah,
stand
no,
and
that's
walk
an
on a
ick.
little
That's like a
thing.
treadmill. I'm not.
How is that an ick? You and this
It's just-
treadmill thing, bro.
Dude, it's not the same. Like, you need to be in nature. You need to connect with grass, like feel the grass, look at it.
Connect
like, get the
with grass. Connect with grass. Guys, we are now connecting with grass. I love to hear it.
Hey, every pothead would agree with me.
But
No, I'm
she
kidding.
would disagree with you, actually.
Yeah, she doesn't like grass. I have a weird dog, everyone. She's not your average
Anti-grass,
dog.
anti-dirt.
She doesn't like
Okay.
crunchy grass. Let's be specific. She likes soft grass, but like crunchy grass is really like it's a big trigger for her. She's not a big
AKA
fan.
Texas grass.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Texas nature is pretty weak. Not to say like all areas, no hate, but like it's pretty flat.
Colorado nature is pretty weak.
Okay,
It is
mistook
mountains,
her
like-
senior pictures in Colorado mountains and in downtown
Guys!
Denver.
What was I gonna make you do? Fly all the way out here to take my pictures?
Okay, little T. Okay, whatever. You and your train tracks. I don't know. I'm from Texas. I literally.
Leave the train tracks out of this. Oh
Okay.
my god.
Little T, we're sidetracking too much. Get focused.
I know.
Lock in.
I'm locked.
Okay. Okay, but so boss POV, wrap it up. This is like your boss when it comes to your one-on-ones, at least for me. It was like, this is your time. So whatever you bring to me, that's what's important to you. And I remember I had like a situation where I received feedback from my team that they didn't have everything they needed to do their job. And I was so frustrated when I received that feedback because I was like, how in the world am I supposed to give you things you need for your job if you do not tell me you need those things for your job? Right? Like,
I did.
as much, I remember the example I used to explain to my to my team was in relationships, we do this weird thing where we're like, oh, if you do it and I don't tell you, it means more. Like, I really love flowers, but I'm not going to tell my boyfriend I love flowers. So if he buys me flowers because he just magically knows that I want flowers, it means more. And here's the thing. In that situation, you spend a lot of your time with this person trying to know every last component of their psyche and every last piece of their health. Like everything that they're interested in, that's kind of like the part of dating. Your manager is not dating you. Your manager is not trying to bring you flowers. Like that is really an unrealistic expectation. Your manager might get you a pizza party with good behavior, but like even that requires high communication. So it's just like
Probably not.
you need to
Probably
tell
not
your
pizza.
manager. you need to tell your manager what you need. Now, there is a fine line of what you tell your manager, right? Like, you can't go to them and be like, I have no idea how to do my job. Like, let's say you fibbed a little bit on your interview. You sold yourself a little higher. You're feeling the imposter syndrome. You can't go to your manager and say, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing and I need you to teach me everything. Because that's going to be a little bit like, you put yourself in this position. You need to do some self-learning. You need to get quick on your feet. But it is a time where you
make it.
Yeah, well, oh yes. Fake it till you make it with like reasonably asking your manager for support. So if your manager is like, let's say you have a huge project coming and you need access to a specific tool that the company doesn't have access to at the moment, that is something you bring up with your manager, because if you don't get access to said tool, you're not going to be able to do your job. If you go through this whole project without getting access to that tool, and then at the end of it, let's say the project doesn't look good and you did a crap job, your manager's going to be like, why didn't you ask me for access? Like, why didn't you cover that? So boss POV, just remember, tell your boss everything, not everything, but everything you need within reason. And, make sure that you're getting your side of the part communicated, because like I said, I'm not preparing huge agendas for this. Like, this is your time. You prepare the agenda, you prepare what we talk about, you prepare the takeaway notes. The more that you show up in your one-on-ones with the manager, the more you're going to get out of it by far. You being organized, you having notes, a follow-up email, all of those things, it's going to make a world of the difference when it comes to your manager. And it's also going to make your manager like you more, because they're not going to sit there and be like, oh my God, what did I tell them I was going to do in this meeting? Like, no, I don't need to do that. They sent me an email. They followed up. They told me what the next steps were. Here's what I need to do. I'm going to make it top of my list because I have, a follow-up. So boss POV, checkmate. Now let's go into our mentality check, because as we know, the way you view something is going to change how you approach it. And so I think one of the biggest misconceptions with one-on-ones is these are meetings to only talk about work. And yes, right, your boss wants to check in on what you're doing. They want to understand your workload, or maybe, if you have any barriers in projects and so forth. But I think the thing that you can't forget, and this is really what makes this mentality wrong, is like, this is often the only dedicated time you're going to have with your boss. And so you don't want to spend it talking about all the things that could just have been an email, right? Like a project update, we're 75% done. I have these things done. Here we are. That is quite literally a Slack message. I don't even know if it needs to be an email. And so don't waste your whole time talking about this stuff. Waste it in the sense of, spending it on the things that, like I said, paying attention to the wrong stuff. If you put 100% of your energy towards the work and you're not putting any percent of the energy towards corporate politics or everything else going on, you're playing the wrong game. And so what the right mentality in this situation is, one-on-ones are your time. They're my time with my boss, right? It's a time to address questions, concerns, challenges. It's a time to advocate for yourself and your accomplishments. This is a big one. Like, a lot of times we think, oh, my boss is going to see that I did this and they're going to acknowledge me. And sometimes bosses are really close to you and they pay a lot of attention and they're really in the weeds. But more times they're not. You mentioned you don't even have these meetings with your managers, right? And so it's like, how will they ever know that you did these amazing, great things and you delighted all of these customers if you don't tell them?
They work. We all work. Even our store manager, we all work together at one point in time. Like, I close with the store manager. Like, shoot, I mean, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but like the store manager wasn't there when you were working with all of these customers earlier, right? And so if she doesn't know that you helped all of these people, because she's not watching everything you're doing, even when she's working with you, she's not like, monitoring every little thing every employee is doing, because that's impossible. It's one person. Yeah. So it's like, even just making those little comments of like, I managed to get this done and I managed to do this and I accomplished this. It makes a huge difference, because you're starting to advocate for yourself. You're starting to share your accomplishments. And more importantly, a lot of times they say like the person who talks the loudest and the most is who gets in charge of meetings, just because they're good about vocalizing, they're good about kind of presenting and putting their own perception into this world and trying to control that narrative. And you know,
So
you
you're
kind
always in control of meetings.
Okay. Well, I started the podcast specifically because I talk so much. So I suppose you could say, I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. But enough about me, little T.
I'm sorry.
Coming from my life. Okay. So another thing too is it's a time to learn. So you're gonna like the person who is above you in the management, that's your manager, right? They are more experienced than you, guaranteed. That's why they're in that position. They know how to do the next job in your path, in a sense, like oftentimes. And so it's a chance for you to like learn and grow and just develop yourself, because they often have stories. I have 1,000 stories, right? They have all of these experiences that they're going to share with you, and they're going to give you more information on, you know, how to improve yourself. Like, it's just a really great perspective. People learn a lot via experience sharing, which is when you kind of tell somebody your full, let's say, your example of a situation that's happening, and then that kind of helps them put it together in their brain. So how do we take action? One, we need to think about what skills that you want to develop, because this is your time. So if you have a skill that you see your managers really good at, it's a good time to talk to them about it. I remember I used to have some employees who really wanted to learn how to sell like me. And that's not something that's easy to teach. Like sales skills take a lot of practice and a lot of time. And so when I was selling with people, you know, afterwards when we would have our one-on-ones, they'd be like, how did you think to say this? How did you think to do this? And I would kind of like fill in the blanks for them, help them understand, like, you know, how magical my brain is, you know, and it's like, it's a sprinkle of ADHD and a sprinkle of just general intelligence. And I get some good answers in there. So, you know, we talked about that. Another thing is, you know, come prepared with, let's say like there are other projects going on in the company, or there are other situations. Maybe it's like a corporate development team, or there's an initiative like a new, I don't know, a group that's hosting some type of corporate party or something like that, right? If there are other things going on in the business that you're not involved in that you want to learn about, bring that to this meeting. That's going to be a good time to talk about this. And then another big one, and this is probably key, just in any scenario you should be doing this, is asking about the business and overall company goals. Yes, a lot of times, you know, your company is going to present like, oh, here's our plan for the year. They're going to give you a high level expectation of, you know, what KPIs they've set. And KPIs are key performance indicators. So they're like metrics that you use to essentially to measure your progress as a company and understand where you're at. And so understanding those goals will also help you, because you can take action in your day-to-day work that align with company goals and ultimately get more spotlight, right? If the company goal is to cut costs and you're able to find a way to, I don't know, decrease the amount of hours used on a certain project, or decrease the number of licenses tied to a specific client, you're going to save the company money. Even if it's $100 or maybe it's $50,000, whatever it is, you've aligned to larger corporate goals, which means you're going to get the attention of more senior leadership. Your boss is going to be happy because it's going to make them look good. And it's something else you can advocate for yourself. So this goes into the last piece, which is to take action. You need to make sure you come to the table with what you've accomplished. Even if it's little stuff, it's worth going to when you're talking about work updates with your boss, it's, I did all of these things, right? I accomplished all of this in the past 2 weeks, week, whatever. And now I have these things to do. I might need your help on this. And then you move on and you talk about the more important stuff, like your career development, where you're going. The last piece is of misconception here. So number 2, managers know what employees need and they lead the meeting. So this is a big misconception, right? Because as I've been saying this whole time, this is your time. This is not my time. I don't schedule a one-on-one meeting so that I can, tell you everything you need to work on. Because once again, that is an email, maybe a Slack message, or maybe you even have, sometimes I see teams, they have like weekly team stand-ups where everyone on the team joins the meeting. And that's the meeting where they discuss, here's your tasks for the week, here's another person's tasks for a week, and everybody has their own, outline of what they need to be working on. And so why is this mentality wrong? Well, most managers are focused on the work. And so if they lead the meeting, they're only going to focus on the things they care about, and you're going to be completely ignored, right? If you go to the table with your manager and you say, hey, what do you want to talk about? You're going to get more work. Most likely. So it's really important that you come to the table with, you're prepared. You know this is your time. Here's everything I want to talk about. And it's also just like having this mentality basically puts your career in your manager's hands, because this is the one time you get, and you're going to spend it talking about what they want. That's not how you do it. And so many times you're going to see that a lot of these managers, they haven't had a lot of training. Realistically, like, it doesn't take much to become a manager. And most of the time, once you are a manager, there isn't, like, let's say, a proper course that most companies give you that prepares you for what to expect. And so you can't just trust them to prioritize your own needs over their needs. And especially if you work in a chaotic environment where there's a lot of work and there's a lot of moving pieces really quickly, it's very easy for your career goals and your development to fall as a bottom priority. Because it's like, oh, we need to deliver these solutions to the clients. Oh, we need to get this out by the end of the week. Cool. I want to do all those things, but let's make sure we save 10 minutes to talk about my career development. And the only way you're going to do that is if you control the meeting and if you lead the conversation. So what's the right mentality? Well, employees know what they need, and they're the ones who lead the one-on-one, right? It's your time to learn and advocate for yourself and what you need. Although your manager might not be able to solve every problem, like let's say that example I mentioned to you where you have a dotted line report to another manager while you're working on another project. Although they can't maybe solve everything with that project, they can definitely provide you with advice. Also, if you don't bring it up, they'll never know. So let's say the project goes really poorly and you didn't mention to your manager that there were XYZ issues in the beginning of it or in the middle of it. At the end of it, it's very easy for the manager to take whatever anybody else says as the truth. You were the one who is supposed to update them along the way. So if you tell them everything's okay and then in the end the project goes terribly wrong, they're going to be surprised, they're going to be confused, and it's going to look bad on yourself versus, on maybe the deliverables or what happened with the client or anything like that. And just remember to lead the agenda. How you show up is going to set the stage for your boss. So if you show up disorganized and unprepared, your boss is going to match you. I used to have some employees who would be extremely prepared for our one-on-ones. And during that time, it would become like I felt pressure. Like I was like, okay, I need to make sure I have my ducks in the row before I have this one-on-one because they are so prepared. I need to come to them with the same level of preparation that they have. And vice versa. If they aren't so prepared, I'm like, oh, it's my one-on-one with so-and-so. It really doesn't matter. They're not going to ask me a lot of questions, and I'm just going to talk to them about whatever we need to talk about. So it does depend, right? So, okay, how do we take action on this? Well, number one, we prepare our agenda, our questions, and what we want to talk about in advance. So we're organized, we're ready to go. If you need something, right? Like you need to take a training or you need to have access to something, you make sure you also prepare all of the information in advance. Like the cost, the time, any company needs, and exactly what you need for the boss. Sometimes I would have employees come to me and be like, okay, I need access to this software because I want to test XYZ. My first question is, okay, how much does it cost, right? How much time are you going to use doing it? Does it fit with our company needs, our company goals? And what exactly am I supposed to do? Yeah. Right? Because a lot of the times A manager is going to expect you to research everything. And then they're like, okay, you need me to sign this piece of paper and fill out this form? Great. Sign the piece of paper, fill out the form for me, and I'll kind of send it off and do what I need to do. And then the last piece is, write an agenda, track your own progress and topics in some form of a documentation, and always send follow-ups. Always. Follow-ups are your paper trail. Companies often, right, they don't necessarily want everything documented because documentation is proof. But something as little as an email where you're like, thank you for this advice. I wasn't sure I understood you when you provided this feedback around, I don't know, let's say people don't like working with you. I wasn't sure what you meant when you provided the feedback around people not liking to work with me, but I'm looking forward to, learning more about this and improving on these skills. And that's you kind of documenting this path of feedback that could either be helpful or harmful in your career path. And at the end of the day, even just the follow-up on, you assigned me these projects, right? Managers have a lot more things thinking or going on in their brain than you do, right? Because they have other team members, they have other workloads, all of these other projects that they're touching. So they're not necessarily thinking at any given point in time, like, this is the specific task I asked this person to do. So when you send a follow-up, you have a documented proof of, you told me to do X, Y, Z. So when they tell you, like, why didn't you do A, B, C? Why didn't that happen? You're like, well, you literally told me to do X, Y, Z. Here's, the follow-up from our one-on-one. If you'd like me to do A, B, C, I'm happy to accomplish that. But just to be clear, like, I did exactly what you told me to do. So mentality checks for one-on-ones, all set. And to go into our next one, red flags. So there are various different red flags that you can see in one-on-ones. One is, they cancel or reschedule often. Now, I think there's like some grace that you show in this section because, I don't know, let's say you're in different time zones. Let's say that they have kids. Like, a lot of times when people have kids, they're, they can have pretty crazy calendars where, oh, my kid's sick. I need to cancel all my meetings today because I'm the one staying home to take care of them. That's totally reasonable. If they cancel and reschedule oftentimes you're going to see an explanation. They're going to give you a little notice, like, I'm really sorry about this, whatever. But if they do it so much with no explanation, no nothing, no message, just changing your meetings for their convenience, it just shows that they don't develop your or they don't prioritize your time and they don't prioritize your development, which is a red flag. Another one is like, it's always a status update and it's never about you. If they're not asking about your challenges, your career, or even just your well-being as a whole, yes, you are a cog in the machine. A cog is a cost of goods. But I'm realizing I'm using acronyms and I need to define them as I go. But yes, you are a cog in the machine, but at the same time, right, like, there is a personal level to managing. And if they're not asking about anything going on with you, it just shows they're not going to care about your career. They're not interested in it, right? Another one is they talk more than they listen. I am probably guilty of this for sure. I get so excited when I talk to my team that I have a tendency to just talk. And so I used to literally ask my team, please cut me off. Because when I get going and I get excited, I know that it is impossible to get me to stop. So let me and this is something I work on with myself, right? But let me make sure that I'm listening to everything you need. Another one is if they only give negative feedback. When a boss isn't recognizing your wins and only focuses on criticizing your mistakes, it can be very demoralizing. It's just not a good space to be in. Like, a lot of the times people do have good attributes no matter what. Like, this comes to the work, right? Feedback should always be about the work and not about you as a person. So a lot of times if they're like, oh, this was poorly written, or oh, this email was sent at a bad hour, or all these things, like, that's fine. But they should be also providing some modeled feedback. Like, hey, the way you wrote this email to this client was actually really good. And if you could do more of this and less of this, that'd be great. Another thing is, big red flag is if they blame people instead of being helpful. So if something goes wrong, let's say your project missed a deadline, they might start pointing fingers instead of focusing on solving problems. If they're pointing fingers, it means they're not taking accountability. They're the leader in this place, right? And so it can be a ruse to distract you and to put you on the wrong path, let's say, to getting a problem solved. A big one is if you feel anxious or dread the meetings with your boss, that's just a clear sign of an unhealthy environment. I know I used to literally dread my one-on-ones with my manager, even though it wasn't like scary or anything like that. It was just, I just knew I was going to get a workaround sometimes and it would give me a headache. And you shouldn't feel so, let's say, stressed out before a casual conversation talking about work updates in your career. Another one is they gaslight or dismiss concerns. Very familiar with this. If you bring up challenges and they make you feel like it's not a real problem, or maybe they are, saying like, oh, we've already done so much around this, but they definitely have not done anything to solve this issue. It's just not a healthy environment. All right. And then I think someone that's small is like, or I should say, sometimes in these conversations that you have with your boss, you might have concerns about like the company nature. Like, let's say, hey, Stacy was crying in the office yesterday. What do you think about that? Or why, like, what's going on with Stacy? And if they're just like, oh, Stacy's perfectly fine, that had nothing to do with us, or, oh, I don't want to, like, there's nothing going on, like, there's just a certain way. Like, obviously, you don't want to talk about people.
Address that. Like, when they try and gaslight you, what are you supposed to be like?
This is a good question. The best way to respond to gaslighting is to say like, well, I remember it differently, or I understand things differently. That's like the best from what I've done in my lifetime. That's like the easiest way to respond. You really can't fight gaslighting. If someone wants to gaslight you, they will go leg for leg. Like, they're going to come at you really hard. And realistically, I don't know if there's a great way to respond to it in general, because it can be really triggering for some. I know for me.
You're just supposed to like be like, yeah, sure, Stacy's fine. And then what? Should I go to like higher up?
Well, no. So if you go around your boss, Stacy might just have to cry. It's really unfortunate. This is the thing. If Stacy's crying in the office, we can already assume it's a toxic work environment. Let's just start there.
This is true. This is true.
So you're not going to
maybe her grandma died. Maybe we should ask Stacy directly.
Absolutely. Yes. Maybe you ask Stacy. I don't know if that's the best path either. I think, okay, realistically, let's be for real. If you're being gaslit, there is a reason why. If something like Stacy crying in the office, to your point, it could be about her grandma dying. It could be about family issues. It could be any of those things. In those instances, your manager is going to be transparent and be like, oh, she's just been having a really hard week. She's been, dealing with some family stuff. Make sure to be nice to her. Let's make sure she knows we're all supportive. That's a very, normal response, because that stuff happens. I mean, I've had employees who have had family stuff going on. They were crying in the office. I literally sent them home because I was like, okay, like, I totally understand you're going through a lot of things right now, and I appreciate you trying to be here and trying to do your job, but you clearly cannot do your job in this current mental state, so go home. Right? Try to work from home, do your thing. Now, when other people asked me about it, I was like, listen, they're dealing with some personal stuff. Let's make sure to just be really supportive and try to help them through whatever they're going through. Obviously, we don't need to get very personal because this is a workplace. We don't want to, pry too much into somebody's personal life, but of course, people are going to be curious, like, why was this person crying? Or like, did something bad happen? And it's like, no, nothing bad happened. Now, if someone comes to you and like, Stacy wasn't crying, you're like, Stacy was definitely crying, right? That manager is already not trying to talk to you. And I think, to your point, it's not necessarily something you ever bring up with higher ups, right? Because if you go around your boss, you are creating tension between you and your boss. So if let's say I'm meeting with like a director, because that's my boss. If I go to the VP behind my boss's back, I just double crossed my boss and I have made an enemy of myself. Because here's what's going to happen, right? The VP is just going to go to them and be like, why didn't you handle your employee and why are they bothering me?
Well, if it's toxic, I mean, like, why not cause drama before you get fired? Like, isn't that a good thing? Like,
little T. No. Little T.
what?
That is bad advice. This is why you're the audience and you're not the person giving the advice. No.
I'm just saying, like, obviously, if they're trying to gaslight Isha me and I'm not feeling the vibes, I mean, I'm already thinking about quitting. So, like, why not go tell the men?
Why not
Big
stir the
men.
pot? Yeah.
Why not stir the pot?
I think, here's the thing. I think that you always want to lead with your best foot at work because you're trying to create a perception, right? So let's say you do some crazy stuff. You start some drama. You get in the pot stirring business, okay? You are not only setting a bad perception of yourself in front of your manager, but you're doing that to the rest of leadership because they're all going to talk about you. Maybe not super negatively, but whatever instance that happens, they're going to discuss your behavior and your actions. So it is, you know how they say, like, take the higher road, be the bigger person. It's very hard. In the corporate world, you have to try to do this your best. You always have to try to kind of take the, let's say, bigger kind of position in something, but don't stoop to their levels, right? Like, stooping to their levels isn't going to help anybody. You're just dragging yourself down into their bad vibes, and we want to be
Maybe
good vibes.
Just hit them with the bless your heart after they gaslight you.
I mean, that's not the worst idea.
Being gaslit, and you're just like, oh, bless your heart.
Yeah. I mean, when I used to get gaslit, I remember I would get so upset. And I would just like, and I couldn't understand, like, at that time, I was so blind to what was going on with me when I was getting gaslit in the workplace that I was just like getting so frustrated. And I'm like, how is everything not making sense? And I definitely did not respond in the beginning of my gaslighting journey with one of my, let's say, old experiences. Like, I did not handle it the best I should have. I played right into their manipulative cards. I played right into what they wanted me to do. But guess what? When I fell victim to it, they were able to paint a picture of who I was to everybody else. Like, oh, Kiana's crazy. She falls off the handles. She doesn't know how to maintain her energy. Or she's so emotional. She's so crazy. And I'm being gaslit. I'm being triggered. Okay, chill. I'm being triggered. I'm being all of these things. I'm just responding to my environment. Now, you know, once I realized what was going on, I could start responding more effectively. And that obviously made for some really, really intense one-on-ones and conversations. But at the end of the day, right, like, I got to walk away with my head held high. I didn't feel bad about how I behaved because it's just not worth it. You don't want to stoop to their level.
Just hit them with the bless your heart and then just leave it at that.
Hit them with a bless your heart in your brain, and hit them with a hit them. Keep that one internal, and maybe hit them with a I understand things differently, or maybe I don't necessarily agree, but I appreciate your point of view.
2 weeks. Sorry.
I mean, the 2 weeks is always a potential response, and
Bro,
I mean,
stand up for Stacy, dog.
Oh my God.
GG.
Yeah.
Get out of there before you turn into Stacy.
Stacy's got kids at home. We got to take care of her. All right.
Chill.
Back to red flags. All right. Next red flag is they violate boundaries. So sometimes, you know, your manager, if they're rescheduling a lot or they have a lot of things going on, they might ask you to work after hours, or they might ask for personal favors, or even, you know, pushing some unethical actions. Stay away from it. This is a big red flag. If this is happening, you need to reconsider your career choices, and you need to think about, you know, what you really want in your career. Because I will say this, a toxic workplace gives you a lot of knowledge. You learn a lot. I mean, I learned a lot in the various toxic workplaces I've worked at. But at the same time, there is a mental health detriment that you pay when you're in these spaces. And so as long as you can recognize them and really protect your sanity and not fall victim to the gaslighting, not fall victim to the manipulating, and in this case, not break your own boundaries for the sake of a company. Sure, you might get fired because you're not willing to work after 7 p.m., but that's your choice, right? And personal favors, I don't know. Sometimes it can get weird. Like if your boss asks you to pick up their laundry, like you're not their assistant. As women, you say,
Has
oh,
this
but
happened to
listen,
you?
Not exactly. Not exactly. Not in that way.
Absolutely not.
There have been instances, I think, where managers can ask for things. Like I have a friend who told me of a manager that asked to borrow money before. And we'll get more into those stories later. But if your manager asks you for money, bad. Just that's not supposed to happen. Yeah.
Just run.
Or even like,
what?
oh, I'm so busy. Can you pick up my kids from school? Like, I don't think they do that. But like those type of things, it's just, if it feels weird in your gut, it's probably weird and it's probably a red flag. And if you say no and they respond badly, that tells you more about that person, right? And about your manager than the situation itself. And then the last one is no career or growth talk. So if they're discussing, let's say like they're discussing your future, but they avoid discussing promotions or raises, or even they don't want to discuss your future, that is a big red flag. Because at the end of the day, when you work at a corporate environment or when you work in some of these spaces, like your growth projections, your career, managers want to do, well, good managers want to develop you. I had probably the most fulfilling moments in my entire career watching some of my team members blossom and really hit like their full potential and see what they're absolutely excellent at. And it was really rewarding for myself, and it was very rewarding for them, of course. And all of this happened because we spent a lot of time talking about raises, promotions, and the future. Now, at the end of the day, dependent on the type of company you're working at, like me, it was a smaller company. Most of the time, you know, raises are trickier because I have a little bit more control of budget, but I also like don't have a lot of it because it's a small company versus like big companies like, I don't know, Amazon, Microsoft, or any of those good guys, Gerber, things like that, right? Those guys are, they usually have like set expectations for raises, set expectations for promotions, like, oh, people can only get promotions under these conditions and only raises under these conditions. And so your manager only has so much to work within, but they should be working with you and helping you navigate it.
Yeah.
Right? So I think another thing that might be just a red flag is if you start to see your boss taking credit for your work, or maybe they're going to guilt trip you for having those boundaries, or sometimes they're only going to care about results. They're not going to care about your well-being. Yeah, it's definitely not good, especially if they're like ignoring HR policies or encouraging shady behavior. Like I've had this happen to me where I felt uncomfortable about a situation because I felt like we were breaking a contract with a partner of ours. And I remember my boss being like, oh, well, I told you to do it, so you're actually not doing anything wrong. And I now understand he clearly did not have my best interests in place. And I was clearly following, it was like the blind leading the blind in a sense.
Slidisha, bro.
Yeah. If it's in your gut, it's bad, right? And if you're afraid to ask for help because you're going to get blamed, or you feel really drained at the end of these conversations with your boss, some more red flags. Just keep that in mind. So concluding in F little T, our episode on one-on-ones, right? They are your responsibility. You have to advocate for yourself. You need to own what you need, right? Your boss is not a mind reader. They do not magically know what's missing in your day-to-day life. And you have to communicate that to them because they don't know what you don't tell them. And they can't guess what your blockers are unless you communicate to them that you have blockers. And more importantly, they're not going to necessarily acknowledge all of your accomplishments if you don't advocate for them, right? You can give someone the opportunity to take credit for your work if you don't advocate that you managed to do something. If you're not promoting yourself as you go through the corporate space, you let other people do the promotion. If you don't create your perception, somebody is going to. And the last piece here is track everything. Send written follow-ups, right, to ensure that you understood task, requests, feedback, but also to make sure you have a paper trail, because a paper trail in business is your best thing. And a pro tip is so if you have like virtual meetings with your boss, you can install AI note takers or transcribe your meetings. A lot of times you can just tell your boss you're doing this. You can record it and know these things. But also, depending on your state, there are different laws around how you can record. So for example, in Colorado, it's single person. What is it called? It's like single person consent. So little T, I can record every single one of our meetings just because I consented to all of our meetings being recorded.
I mean, yeah, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I have proof of you bullying me. So
I don't, whatever. Gaslight Isha. Stay away from her, bro.
I just want everyone to listen to this pod and think of all the mean comments little T has thrown my way, because it is not Gaslight Isha. It is Fact Isha.
It's giving Stacy's crying wolf, bro.
Whoa. Do not put me in Stacy's bucket. I have never cried in the office. Chill. Okay.
Stacy's crying wolf.
Well, everybody, that's everything you need to know about one-on-ones. You don't know what you don't know. And I think your one-on-ones is a really important time that you have with your boss. If you use them well, you can get a lot out of it. So stay smart, stay agile, and peace and love.
Peace and love.